Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of RantER. I haven't done one of these in quite a while, I'm so sorry about that. But we're back, and as you guys might have guessed by looking at the title, today's topic is going to be Dailin is bad. Alright, now before you guys click off the video, give me a little bit of time to explain why I personally think that in the current meta, I would have to say somewhere around maybe late Season 6 as well as nearly the entirety of Season 7, Dailin has been bad. And when I say bad, I don't mean that, she's been completely unplayable throughout the entire 2 seasons. No, that is not exactly what I'm saying. What I'm trying to display to you is the simple fact that the idea behind Dailin and the way that she's supposed to be played throughout a game doesn't necessarily allow her to be successful in a game meta like Eternal Return right now as of 0.72, and maybe some of the reasons as to why she might be struggling. Now, I will get a little bit into this later on in the video. I personally don't have a fix for this though. That is the biggest problem with it. That's why I kind of wanted to delay this video a lot longer, and it's something that I've been talking and thinking about for a long time now, both on stream as well as off stream. But I kind of wanted to lay down everything and just mention some of the things that I wanted to be talking about when it comes down to the history of Dailin, as well as Dailin's strengths, as well as some of Dailin's weaknesses. So let's get right into the video. Now, of course, looking at the background, I'm not playing Dailin. If I'm going to be completely honest with you, I haven't been enjoying her too much recently. I've been playing a lot of Ekion. That's the reason why Ekion is on in the background, so sorry if it's a little bit of a disappointment there, but yeah, we're going to be playing Ekion here in the background while I talk about some of this stuff about Dailin, and maybe you guys can also agree with some of the points that I have too. There's been a lot of history when it comes to Dailin, with a lot of people consistently talking about how she's strong. She has a lot of mobility, as well as being strong just every single time across the board. I'm gonna debunk that a little bit, so for all of you guys who still think Dailin is strong, I'm sorry, but these are my personal thoughts, of course, so you guys don't have to completely agree with them, but as someone who's been playing Dailin for a while myself, I generally do think these points are pretty valid when it comes down to it, so here we go. To begin, let's talk a little bit about the history of Dailin. So, I personally started playing Eternal Return right around the time right before Season 1, so I guess you could de facto call it Season 0. And during that time, I used to play a lot of Dual Sword Jackie, some fun times there. Superior, if you're watching this video, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But then I started looking for other options, and since I'm the type of person to play kind of like this fighter, bruiser style kind of character in almost every single game I play that allows me to pick that style of class, I decided that Dailin looked really fun. And when I first picked her up, I was automatically just in love with the gameplay style of Nunchaku, as well as just in general like the sounds of it as well. Whenever you hear Nunchaku auto attacking, it sounds amazing. So I just immediately fell in love with Nunchaku, did not want to play Glove, even though Glove was probably by far one of the better weapons, especially in the early days of Dailin. I decided to stick with Nunchaku instead. So, for the history of Nunchaku, at least when it comes down to it, it always used to be kind of like a straight up crit style build until very recently, where you start having a little bit of a hybrid. The very original crit build was a very fast style build back in the day where Eternal Return didn't really have fast builds, and this was due to a lot of different factors, such as kind of the loot spawn AI not existing and all that stuff, but this build was very consistent, allowing you to go from Hospital, Dock, to Chapel, and this was also when the Chapel Hyperloop also used to be in a much better spot for Dock before, so it was a lot faster. Then you go to Hospital, finish up a couple of items, and then completely finish your build down in Beach. Now, this build was very strong. I did play it in a tournament a very, very long time ago. Didn't do too well, but it was the first tournament that I went out to, and I did manage to get into a final. There's a whole history behind that. So this build in general has a very special place in my heart for me. Very slow now, because it is quite a long build considering it is a crit Dailin build, but back in the days it used to be an absolute godsend when it comes to saving the Chaku Dailin. Next, Cerberus released, and this was sometime either very late Season 1 or in early mid-Season 2. And when Cerberus first came out, this weapon was not that great. It was very difficult to route because it was the first item, I believe, in the game that forced you to build boots of all things to build into the weapon. Now the stats on it were okay, but I don't think at that time when Cerberus first released it was a good time for it to come out, because there hasn't been a lot of important items that I'm about to talk about just right now that allowed Cerberus to really start succeeding throughout the history of the game. So let's talk about a couple of the items that really made Cerberus really good and a lot more meta when it comes down to it. And those two items are Jolly Roger as well as Diadem. Starting around late Season 2, early Season 3, Nimble Neuron started adding a lot of very kind of more diverse style of items that allow people to have a lot more kind of diverse style of gameplay. And the first item that came out that really made a big difference as to Cerberus being good was Diadem and Jolly Roger. Jolly Roger allowed you to chase people down, which is something that Dailin really needed. And two, Diadem also fit in line with Cerberus's build routes, as well as having additional cooldown reduction, which was nigh impossible to do for a Nunchaku Dailin route. And this was also this time when Nimble Neuron started to experiment with locking down Lee Dailin's cooldown for her Q, the Spirited Kicks, down to a flat 12 seconds. So the cooldown was very much needed. The stats on Diadem as well as Jolly Roger, of course Jolly Roger has attack power, Diadem also has attack power, so you could absolutely not go wrong with that one, and honestly that is the time when Cerberus genuinely started to pop off. The only problem with this one though, is I personally think back when Cerberus first came out, and even until now, even though it's a little bit on the better side, I don't think Nimble Neuron ever had a plan for the identity of Cerberus. When it first came out, it was absurdly strong. Just looking at the stats alone, in my opinion, now that I'm looking back at it, definitely a very solid item. Over the course of time, it has gotten nerfed, it has gotten buffed, it has gotten changed, it's got changed again, small buffs, reverts, nerfs, you name it, Cerberus has had it. And the one that we have right now is the version where we have the Force Core with the attack range, the attack speed, as well as the attack power. Definitely a lot different than what we saw before for Cerberus. At least the idea around it is pretty similar, and that's the reason why I think, you know, Cerberus, Nimble Neuron kind of has an idea of what they want to do with it, especially with the introduction of Hydra completely separating the attack power as well as the amplification in Chaco transitions. But this genuinely was a time when Cerberus started becoming strong. Another item on top of it as well was Plasma Arc. All of those items, including Cerberus, just had a really nice routing for all of those items. And once people started figuring out, Cerberus was genuinely meta for a very long time, way better than what Vibro could really give you. And people even started doing a Vibro build transitioning into Cerberus, which was what I used to run for even more mastery, since back then crafting mastery was amazing. And of course, now in the current days, we have Blue 3. Blue 3 is literally the epitome of everything that Crit Nunchaku could ever wish for. You have critical chance, you have cooldown, you have a decent amount of attack power, you have healing reduction, which is a very rare stat to have when it comes down to a crit build as well. So Blue 3 upon release got 3 nerfs in a row at the very beginning because of how strong it was when it comes down to attack power. At its current point, it is definitely still a solid item, but it's not what it used to be when it was on release. Thank God for that one, because Blue 3 back then was genuinely strong. But over the course of this time, while we think about the development of, you know, Crit Nunchaku Dailin, we also have to remember that other things are being added into the game as well, and we'll talk about that and the reason why, even throughout these very good things coming out for Dailin, it made it very difficult for this character to succeed a lot more often than you guys might think. Now, another thing that I will talk about, of course, I'm kind of bypassing Glove for a little bit here because I don't have a solid history on it. I didn't really play Glove too much. I was known as a Nunchaku aficionado when it comes down to Dailin. I can give a little bit of Glove, I guess, but let me talk about Amp Dailin first. Amp Dailin genuinely started becoming quite something the moment augments were released, and the reason behind it is because Amp Drone was amazing. Amp Drone was amazing. Lee Dailin's base damage on her ultimate was absolutely amazing, as well as her amplification scaling on Nunchaku being absolutely amazing as well. So there were times where people did make some really good amp builds, did really well. Lee Dailin got nerfed, but it also hurt the regular base version of Dailin as well. That's another thing I'll be talking about later on in the video too. But Amp Dailin has a moment, dies for quite a while, has another moment, dies for quite a while, has another moment, dies for quite a while. You get the point. That is exactly what has happened here. Now, I'm going to take a short moment to talk about Glove. Now, again, I haven't played Glove too much, so I can't really give too much of my opinion on it. But Glove has a slightly different gameplay style, as you can kind of tell if you've been playing Eternal Return for quite a while. You have multiple ways of building Glove. One is going to be crit, since you have access to White Claw Punch. Or you can also go the Bruiser style, where you can also run White Claw Punch, but we've had builds where, for example, Binky in NA ran this quite a lot, where it was a 3-zone route between Forest Beach and Hotel, where you ran Blood Ring Razor Knuckles, and you just RNG things, at least back then when Binky ran it, or you could also run a little bit just more of like a standard build and just have a little bit more of a spread between attack power, defense, and a little bit of health going into it, since style and stats are pretty good. So there were different styles of gameplay that you could play with Glove. I didn't play them until very recently myself, so I can't give you a full rundown on the history around it. But Glove was definitely better, because even back then as well, Uppercut, the weapon skill for Glove, used to crit. So that definitely used to be good, and just empowered your next auto, so you didn't have to like physically hover your mouse over a target and then press the skill button to actually land it. It was a lot easier to land back then too. So in general, Glove definitely a lot better in my opinion before compared to Nunchaku for a solid majority of Lee Dailin's time. So, why is Dailin bad? Let's start talking about this one. Over the course of time of Eternal Return, there was definitely a time when mobility was very heavily gated in this game. But as the game developed, of course, like through the entire seasons, through all the character releases, through all the gameplay mechanic changes and everything like that, mobility has become very much more accessible with all the more recent character releases, especially someone like Sua, for example, having a ton of mobility just built into their regular kit to begin with, makes it so Lee Dailin's mobility has not been great for a very, very long time when you put it objectively up against other characters. And a lot of people will kind of fight back on this and say, you have a free getaway button even before the change recently to Lee Dailin's ultimate, saying, oh, if you're in trouble, just ult out. Yes, that is technically true, but you have to remember that Lee Dailin's ultimate is very, very strong, and it's a very essential part of Lee Dailin's kit when you want to try killing somebody, unless you're just way too far ahead to the point where the other opponent can't overpower you. You need your ult to kill people, and that means before, when you of course, didn't have your ultimate because you used it to run away, that's a 3-minute cooldown at level 1 that you're just not going to be able to snowball early on, and every single build with Crit Dailin always needed you to snowball down the late game, so you're missing out on a ton of time just by using it to get away there. So mobility, definitely not that big of a factor for Lee Dailin for quite a long time now. And another big thing, in my opinion, that has been very, very problematic for a character like Dailin that really likes to kind of get in your face, auto-attack you down, and just try to overpower you. She doesn't have any hard crowd control built into her basic kit outside of her ultimate. I'm thinking of characters, for example, like Yuki, Marcus, 11, these characters that have such easy ways to lock down Lee Dailin and make it very difficult for her to really initiate onto characters unless you can play it perfectly, right? Like, for example, you can block Yuki's stun. That sure works, but good Yukis will play around that as well. Marcus will just throw you around no matter what you do. 11 will taunt you no matter what you do. And then they'll have all the power in the fight. And especially with the introduction of Diamond Shard into the game as well, especially, it makes it so difficult to fight people after you get initially baited into the fight, right? So when Dual Sword Yuki stuns you, he gets Diamond Shard, you're still at half HP because he crit you and now you're at half HP, he's still autoing you down, so you have to use your ulti to get away. For same thing with like 11 or Marcus as well. Before you have time to retaliate, the fight is already over because they've already won when it comes to overpowering you when you need to be the one overpowering them. So that's another definite thing that Lee Dailin lacks with compared to the current day's meta day and age. So that's definitely another one that really makes it tough for Lee Dailin to lock people down. One last thing is that there's a lot of ranged characters in this game nowadays that are very much more meta. Actually, there's one more point that I want to get after this, but this is like this season specific, so I guess I could add it there now that I just remember it. But amp characters are very, very safe, especially the ranged ones as well, or even just like ranged auto attackers, for example. Like, let's say Rio, for example, is very safe when it comes down to it, right? Because one of the toughest things for Dailin to do, especially in this current day and age, that a lot of other melee characters are able to do, is initiate onto characters without blowing a massive part of your kit, making it very difficult for you to either, one, finish the fight, or two, get away from the fight without having to blow something else that is massive. For example, you're fighting into Rio, let's say, for example, right? You have to use your Qs in, unless she just walks into you, which will never happen in high elo. You take a ton of damage while you're going in. You still have to blow pretty much like half of your damage just trying to gap close into the distance of the Rio. They also have their mobility to get away, so you use your ultimate to go in, but they also have stuff like their ultimate to push you away. They have healing drone. They have a lot of ways to survive, which means that you just took a bad fight. You used everything in your kit to try initiating onto them, which means now you're the one at a back end, and you're either going to die or you kill them. Most of the time, you died. It just straight up means TLDR, you have absolutely no avenue to try to go into a fight without having a definitive advantage in the fight, unless you are way too far ahead again to let yourself get to the point where you're just allowed to walk straight into people and still kill people when you're at half HP the moment you reach them, and also when you still lack about half of your kit to try to kill the other person. That's another big part there. One last thing that's kind of minor, but it is still a pretty big deal. A lot of characters nowadays are amp based. They poke you so hard. And this is kind of in line with like the basic attackers as well, but amp characters are even worse because you kill them, let's just like somehow say that you kill them, you don't get anything out of it. If they have transitions, you're most of the time not using it. You can kind of, but it's not like you're going to transition your base attack power build and go for a complete swap around and go for amp because you just have like 3 transitions that are amp based. It's not that easy to do anymore compared to before. So that's another small problem that definitely factors into making sure that Lee Dailin is in a very tough spot right now compared to a lot of other melee characters that have ways to go around it, right? Again, either survivability, they have like diamond shard accessibility, they have crowd control to lock down range characters, for example, multiple mobilities like Ekion, for example, that allows you to get away with a lot of things. Lee Dailin doesn't have access to that, which means it's very difficult for her to initiate into a fight. It makes it very difficult for her to look for opportunities in a fight. It makes it very difficult to actually get kills in a lot of cases unless you're very far ahead. It makes it very difficult to leave fights. That's basically everything that Dailin really ever wants. So in the current day and age, Dailin definitely struggles in every single aspect that she really is looking for. The only characters, in my opinion, that really has it hard against Dailin is like Nathapon, because you can cancel out pretty much his entire kit just with one swing of your pass with your W, and it's very predictable when Nathapon's gonna do it too. So other than characters like that, it is so difficult for Dailin to find any advantages in a fight before you actually start getting into it. The bigger problem here is that I don't have any fixes. If you start adding a ton of stuff to Dailin, she will become strong. And one of the reasons why I think it's not a good idea to do that is because KR has a ton of really good Dailin players, and sometimes the stats are bloated, sometimes the stats are not. A lot of times, especially when I've been checking a lot of the top tier Dailin players in KR, the only games that they win are the ones that they genuinely dominate on, because they get completely free objectives, which is almost unthinkable of in the international regions. That never happens. You go into the replays of a lot of these 7, 8 kill games on Dailins, they get every single objective for free, and they use that lead, they use that snowball to completely demolish the late game. That is it. But you can't really do that often in international regions. So when you take a look at the stats and they say, like, Nunchaku Lee Dailin, 6% win rate, 7% win rate, you come to realize that the only times that Dailin ever wins is when she is way, way, way too strong in a single game, because she was allowed to get literally everything in the game on her own without any contention. This video by no means is like straight up fact or anything, right? I've been a Dailin player for a very long time. I have very strong opinions when it comes to Dailin because I am in love with this character. So if there's, of course, there's going to be some bias coming from me saying, oh, my main is weak, buff my main. But I'm trying to say all of this from a very objective standpoint, from what I can see as well. And in my opinion, this is also very much proven with some evidence as well, as a lot of Korean tournaments, Lee Dailin's players have been struggling. Nero, for example, in the most recent Season 7 finals, very much struggled on the Lee Dailin because he found no opportunities to really get in one up on any other player, whether it was through Nunchaku, whether it was through Glove, because other characters are accelerating too fast and also having way too much to deal with the Lee Dailin that he just doesn't really have any answers to be able to match into those players unless he just randomly gets lucky, which in a lot of cases in tournaments are very, very rare. Even Sergey, another really good Dailin player in KR, failed to get out of qualifiers in, I believe it was Open number 8 for ERM this season, because Lee Dailin is very much struggling in the current day and age. And that pretty much sums up everything I want to say about Lee Dailin right now. There is definitely a lot more things I feel like I could have said when it comes down to the problems of Lee Dailin, but overall, just like everything that you want to do is pretty heavily gated with the current day and age's meta, and that's the real point that I want to drive there. But in the end, these are all my opinions, and what really matters is what you guys think about this topic as well. So let me know down in the comments below what you guys really think about Dailin in general. You know, whether you think is problematic, whether she's very weak, whether she needs changes, buffs, nerfs, whatever you got, name it down in the comments below. Let me know as well, because a lot of things about Dailin I definitely want to know when it comes to the community's thoughts on her. Although I will say a lot of them I've been disagreeing with nowadays, that's completely fine. And that's gonna honestly be it for me. If you guys have any other video ideas, of course, for RantER, let me know down in the comments below. Always glad to hear from you guys in regards to topics that I could do more research on. And also let me know what you guys thought about the video down below as well. Always appreciate all the support that you guys have been giving me in recent times as well. Thank you so very much for that. And I will see you guys at the next video, whichever one that might be. And I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.